The Rose Technics Ceramics X. It's got the features. At around $45, the Ceramics X sits just below the ear-free i3 in the true wireless lineup, but has even more features. Immediately, it is evident that some corners had to be cut to achieve this price. The case feels much cheaper, especially the hinge, which doesn't have quite as satisfying a mechanism. The buds themselves also feel very light and toy-like, especially compared to the ear-free i3. The version I was provided was without the Super NC200 foam tips, so my impressions are all from using these with the very standard stock silicone tips. The case actually feels very nice and smooth in the hand, and is a very typically small pill shape that could very easily fit in and out of any bag or trouser pocket. The buds, however, due to their small size and lack of stems, can be quite challenging to use and fit into the ears. I personally found it quite difficult to guess exactly how to press them into my ears and exactly the angle to get the correct tip insertion, depth, and fit. Also, using the medium-sized tips, these are the only IEMs I've ever used that turn the tips inside out when I take them out of my ears, which on one hand can be a frustrating extra step to fix before putting them back into the case, but it's also reassuring that the provided tips do make a very secure fit into my ear canals, as they are the only real anchor point for these. On the flip side, once they're seated in my ears, they are more comfortable than average, have practically zero chance of falling out, and I noticed I can even chew gum without affecting the bass seal or affecting the sound, a surprisingly common problem with many other IEMs. Also, I found the touch controls much easier to use on these than the ear-free i3, with fewer unregistered touches, but also more accidental touches when taking them in and out of my ears. The RoseLink app is just about feature-rich enough to get by. The main UI features left and right battery indicators, and buttons for the 4 different modes. Noise cancelling, which is your average ANC, wind noise, which cancels wind noise, normal mode, which turns off all special modes, and transparency, which picks up and feeds certain frequencies in the upper vocal range. Just below that, the Supermaster EQ is a very generous description for 3 preset EQ profiles: pop, rock, and hi-fi. In reality, hi-fi and rock are very similar, with the biggest difference being that rock has a noticeable touch less treble, and pop is the outlier, as it sounds much more laid back, and kind of lacking in detail since the treble presence is significantly reduced. The pop's mids are less boosted and a touch more natural sounding, but the bass is also thicker, and may sound best with some electronic music. I think most people would be happiest with the rock profile, but of course I would recommend trying out all the settings in combination with EQ to taste. Next is the lossless audio protocol menu. It simply lets you choose between LDAC and AAC SBC. Below that is the game mode toggle, which when turned on sacrifices lossless audio for improved latency, which is essential for watching videos or mobile gaming, but I would still not recommend these for competitive gaming, as there is still the tiniest of delays in the sound that the average consumer, let alone pro gamers, would notice, even while watching videos. Then finally is the dual device connection toggle, which allows them to be connected to multiple devices at once for seamlessly switching between devices, such as smartphone and PC while working. In this case, while the feature is turned on, you will sacrifice LDAC, and the app automatically defers to AAC SBC. At the bottom of the main menu, you can switch between the earphone control menu, which we've already covered, the touch settings menu, which allows you to set the different functions for single, double, and triple taps on both left and right buds, and finally, the settings center menu, that you may only need to change the language or check for updates. The app is also unfortunately not without its bugs. As of writing this review, I updated to version 3.0.5, in brackets 4062, which did fix one older bug where the reconnect button would not work after switching between wireless protocols. It's fixed now, but I still would prefer that the app reconnect to the IEMs automatically without human interaction. This is where things get interesting. The Ceramics X has a very healthy Harman-like bass shelf response, with even a very slight emphasis on sub-bass between 10 and 20 Hz. This is actually a near perfect bass tuning for outdoor use where external noise interference can and will reduce bass perception, whether ANC is on or not. The only thing I would add is that this can introduce some boominess depending on the music recording and volume. The mids are generally well controlled, and the hump between 1 and 2 kHz suits my ears very well, but may be too forward for those whose ears prefer the dotted line target graphs. Personally, I would have preferred less of a peak around 5 kHz, but that's something easily remedied by simple equalization. The treble's actually quite piercing at times, and I found that with some specific recordings, I had to EQ the upper treble down by around 8 decibels to make these comfortable. But on the whole, this boosted area gives the Ceramics X a kind of artificial air, which tricks you into thinking you're hearing music from a greater sense of space. It's interesting to see this kind of trick being used, but it doesn't mesh with all recordings. One more positive thing I can say about these is that the tuning between modes hardly changes at all, with only the pure ANC noise cancelling mode having a very slight difference in the sub-bass and lower mids around 1 kHz, so you only need to set one EQ profile for these, no matter which mode you're going to use, and switching mode shouldn't obviously change the tone. Another great feature is the wind cancelling mode. Something I found very annoying on the ear-free i3 was that when using noise cancelling on the street, the microphones would pick up the noise on their microphones, so on windy days I was stuck with using them in normal mode, which at least didn't amplify the wind, but it also didn't reduce external noise. The Ceramics X does an excellent job of reducing wind noise. In this mode, it very specifically only reduces wind. So while it doesn't reduce typical external noises like plane engines or city traffic, it does make them significantly more enjoyable and listenable in very windy situations, which I personally think is a very handy feature that helps to explain the price of this product. I tested this by sitting in front of a floor standing fan at full power, and I took them to a very windy day at the beach. The Ceramics X passed both tests. Finally, I'd like to sum up my impression of the sound as more than adequate. The stock tone can be a touch sharp and piercing. Overall clarity is very fair at this price point, but imaging is a touch lacking, and some recordings can feel somewhat lackluster in presentation. Of course, it's far better than the typical consumer fodder, and I'm happy to say it's in around the same league as the ear-free i3, but also something entirely different. Now for something I have not really spoken about in the past, but something I feel strongly about. This type of product is completely unrepairable for the normal consumer. There may be shops that specialize in repairing PCs, laptops and smartphones that could perform microsurgery on these when the tiny rechargeable batteries inevitably die, but even then the repair costs would be prohibitively expensive for such a cheap product, even if repairs were guaranteed, which they are not. I find it impossible to condone these types of convenience products that are destined to become e-waste. So from a moral standpoint, there is no way I could recommend a product like this based purely on its sound quality alone, and even less for its lack of repairability. But as a convenience product that seeks to provide the consumer with a set of features at cost, these clearly fit well into the market. If you're going to use these for the occasional bike ride or workout at the gym, I can absolutely see these becoming an essential part of that routine, even for the average consumer audiophile. We're definitely going to see more of these types of products from almost all manufacturers, where the best technologies have trickled down in a more diluted form to reach the masses at more affordable prices. But I hope the next big step in this area should be environmental consciousness, as lower prices are only exponentially increasing the problem, and something like simply fixing the frequency response to cater for more discerning ears will only be enough to justify higher asking prices, and not enough to satisfy the increasing number of environmentally conscious consumers. After two previous wins for Rose Technics with the ear-free i3 and the Star City 5 Pro, I'm happy to say that they've not produced any lemons so far. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.